On the morning of, a joint federal task force stood before a wall of cameras in a fortified briefing room beneath the Dirksen Federal Building in Washington, D.C., and delivered a statement that would send tremors through every corridor of American power. 17 months of covert surveillance, 412 wiretapped phone lines, 9 countries, $1.5 billion in laundered revenue, and a pipeline that connected the highest echelons of Iranian state-backed financing to a Mexican cartel corridor bleeding fentanyl into the American heartland at a rate no one had ever documented before. They called it the largest narco-political infiltration operation ever uncovered on United States soil. And if you think that sounds like an exaggeration, stay with me. Because what federal agents found beneath the surface of this network will change the way you think about borders, about trust, and about who is really running the machinery behind the curtain. Let me show you how deep it goes. At 4:17 a.m. on March 14th, the border city of El Paso, Texas, was wrapped in a dry fog that clung to the Rio Grande like gauze on a wound. The streets downtown were dead silent. Neon from a shuttered pawn shop flickered against the pavement. Somewhere south, across the black ribbon of the river, Juarez glowed amber on the horizon. And in the stillness between both cities, 57 vehicles rolled without headlights through pre-staged positions along a 12-block grid. FBI hostage rescue operators, DEA tactical units, ICE Homeland Security Investigations teams, SWAT elements from 3 Texas field offices, DHS Customs and Border Protection Special Response teams. They moved in staggered columns, synchronized to the second. Each squad assigned a numbered target on an operational overlay that stretched from downtown El Paso to the rural outskirts of Hudspeth County. At 4:19, the first flashbang detonated inside a concrete block warehouse on Paisano Drive. The steel door folded inward like paper. Agents in black moved through the smoke with rifles raised, boots crunching over shattered glass. Inside, they found what looked at first glance like an auto repair shop. Lifts, tool chests, the smell of motor oil. But behind a false wall reinforced with rebar sat a packaging operation running at industrial scale. Vacuum sealers, heat press machines, thousands of blue fentanyl pills already boxed in shipping crates stamped with a Phoenix-based trucking company logo. Simultaneously, 3 blocks east, a second team breached a converted nightclub operating as an underground casino. Blackjack tables, slot machines wired to off-grid power, a back office with floor-to-ceiling surveillance monitors showing live feeds of the border fence, the international bridge, and 2 separate highway checkpoints. In a safe behind a false bookshelf, agents recovered $2.3 million in bundled U.S. currency, 11 kilograms of cocaine, and 3 encrypted satellite phones. 2 miles south, a third element hit a residential property in a quiet neighborhood near the Isleta port of entry. From the outside, it was a modest ranch-style home with a chain-link fence and a children's swing set in the yard. Inside, they found 11 undocumented migrants locked in a windowless basement room with no ventilation. The walls were scratched with tally marks. A human trafficking transit house operated in full view of an elementary school. By 4:47, all 12 primary targets in El Paso were secured. Agents had seized over 2.1 million fentanyl pills, 340 kilograms of methamphetamine, 87 kilograms of cocaine, 14 kilograms of heroin, and $7.8 million in cash. 41 individuals were in federal custody. But none of that was the discovery that changed the trajectory of the operation. That came at 4:52 a.m. in the basement of Target 7, a shuttered logistics firm near the rail yard. Behind a reinforced steel door that required a cutting torch to breach, agents found a room no bigger than a storage closet. Inside were 3 sealed Pelican cases. One contained hard drives. One contained ledgers, handwritten in Farsi and Spanish. And the third held a single laptop, still warm, still connected to a satellite uplink, bouncing its signal through a relay in Beirut. The room smelled like cigarette smoke. Someone had been there minutes before the breach. Someone had almost made it out. By 6 a.m., those drives were on a secure flight to the FBI's Cyber Division laboratory at Quantico, Virginia. By 9:15 a.m., a team of 14 forensic analysts had broken the first layer of encryption. What they found on the screen stopped conversation in the room. A network diagram. Hundreds of nodes. Color-coded connections linking shell companies in Dubai, Tehran, Mexico City, Panama, and Houston. Financial transfers routed through ghost corporations with names like Crescent Valley Holdings, Solano Agricultural Exports, and Bright Meridian Charitable Trust. Money flowing in loops designed to be invisible, passing through cryptocurrency exchanges, obscure banks in the Cayman Islands, and a chain of halal grocery stores in Dearborn, Michigan that had never sold a single bag of rice to a real customer. The analysts gave the network a designation. They called it Operation Broken Meridian. At the center of that network sat a name none of them had expected. Not a cartel boss, not a foreign intelligence officer, a domestic political figure. A man who had spent the last 9 years building a reputation as a tough-on-crime reformer in the American Southwest. Governor Raymond Castellano. Fictional, invented for this story. But listen to what the data showed, because the architecture of what he allegedly built is the point. Castellano's encrypted authorization key was embedded in the metadata of over 300 logistics manifests that coordinated shipments of narcotics from Sinaloa cartel staging areas in Chihuahua, Mexico, through tunnel systems near Columbus, New Mexico, and into distribution hubs in Albuquerque, Phoenix, Dallas, and Las Vegas. His digital fingerprint appeared on wire transfer approvals routing Iranian-sourced capital through Dubai intermediaries into the same shell companies funding the cartel's U.S. operations. His private email, accessed through a VPN terminating in Zurich, contained correspondence with a man identified only as El Arquitecto, believed to be a senior Sinaloa cartel logistics commander operating out of Culiacan. This was not corruption. This was command-level collusion. A sitting governor allegedly operating as the strategic architect of a billion-dollar narco-financial pipeline linking Iranian money to Mexican cartel distribution on American soil. And the operation had only just begun. At 5 a.m. on March 15th, 22 hours after the El Paso raids, a federal command center activated inside Fort Bliss. The room was enormous, a converted aircraft maintenance bay fitted with wall-to-wall digital displays. On the central screen, a map of the American Southwest pulsed with over 90 red markers, each one representing a confirmed node in the Broken Meridian network. They stretched from San Diego to Houston, from Tucson to Denver, with tendrils reaching into Kansas City, Atlanta, and Chicago. The mission commander, a DEA assistant administrator whose name remains classified, addressed 1,200 federal agents via encrypted video link. FBI field offices in 8 states, DEA tactical teams, ICE HSI units, SWAT elements staged at 26 forward operating positions, 4 Black Hawk helicopters idling on the tarmac at Biggs Army Airfield, an armored convoy of 20 MRAP vehicles staged along Interstate 10, and offshore, though never publicly confirmed in this fictional account, U.S. Navy vessels repositioned in the Gulf of Mexico to monitor maritime smuggling routes linked to the network. The order was given at 5:04 a.m. Execute. In the Arizona desert west of Nogales, agents hit a cartel superlab buried inside an abandoned copper mine. The operation was producing methamphetamine at a rate of approximately 800 pounds per week. Chemical drums lined tunnels that ran a quarter-mile underground. The air was toxic. Agents wore respirators. They arrested 14 cartel operatives and seized enough precursor chemicals to produce an estimated 5 tons of finished product. In the hills above Scottsdale, a SWAT team breached a $12 million estate registered to a shell company called Meridian West Properties. The house had bulletproof windows, a panic room with independent air supply, and a basement server farm running encrypted communications for the entire western distribution arm of the network. The homeowner, a man carrying a Mexican passport under the name Arturo Delgado Fuentes, attempted to flee through a rear tunnel that connected to an adjacent property. He was tackled by agents in the drainage culvert 50 yards from the exit. Near Columbus, New Mexico, Border Patrol tactical units and FBI agents located a tunnel system that ran 640 feet beneath the international boundary. The tunnel had ventilation, electric lighting, a rail system for moving cargo, and a hydraulic elevator at the U.S. terminus, concealed beneath a commercial warehouse. Inside, they recovered 1,400 kilograms of cocaine and shipping manifests bearing the same coded nomenclature found on Governor Castellano's encrypted drives. In Houston, a team raided a strip of 6 restaurants along Westheimer Road, all owned by the same holding company. Behind the kitchens, agents discovered false-walled rooms used for repackaging narcotics for last-mile delivery across the Gulf states. In the office of the parent company, they found payroll records showing monthly payments to 19 individuals identified as active-duty law enforcement officers in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. By noon on March 15th, the combined operation had executed raids across 4 states. The numbers were staggering. Over 4.6 tons of narcotics seized, including fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine. $43 million in currency and assets frozen. 178 arrests. 12 tunnel systems identified, 7 of them previously unknown to any federal agency, and 23 encrypted server nodes captured, each one a window into the deeper machinery of the network. The underworld took more damage in 31 hours than it had absorbed in the previous decade. But the raids were not the end. They were the key that unlocked the most disturbing chapter. In the days that followed, as forensic teams excavated the digital wreckage of Operation Broken Meridian, a picture emerged that made veteran investigators physically ill. The cartel had not merely bribed law enforcement, it had colonized it. Across the 4 states implicated, investigators identified 67 compromised law enforcement officials, patrol officers, senior sergeants, a deputy chief in a mid-sized Texas city, 2 judges in rural New Mexico counties who had systematically dismissed drug trafficking charges over a 4-year period, a state legislator in Arizona who had introduced a bill to defund a border surveillance program at the exact moment the tunnel network was being expanded, and 14 U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers who had manipulated patrol grids to create predictable blind spots along 30-mile stretches of the border timed precisely to the hour when cartel convoys crossed. The payments were meticulous, never cash. Instead, mortgage payments routed through third-party escrow firms. College tuition for children deposited into 529 plans by non-existent relatives. Cryptocurrency wallets loaded in small increments that never triggered reporting thresholds. A system designed not just to buy loyalty, but to make that loyalty untraceable. One honest Border Patrol agent, who had reported anomalies in scheduling patterns for 2 years without response, sat across from federal investigators and said 5 words that became the emotional core of the internal report. He said, "I thought I was alone." He was not alone, but he had been made to feel that way deliberately by a system engineered to isolate anyone who asked questions. Federal agents arrested 31 of the 67 compromised officials in a single coordinated sweep. The rest were placed under sealed indictment or turned as cooperating witnesses. Among the arrested was a senior planner in the New Mexico State Police who had served 22 years and received over $1.4 million in cartel-sourced payments. When agents entered his home, they found a framed commendation for distinguished service hanging directly above a desk drawer, containing a burner phone with direct dial access to a Sinaloa cartel handler in Juarez. What investigators were looking at was not a police force with a few bad actors. It was a parallel enforcement system, a second, invisible command structure that answered not to the people of the United States, but to a cartel syndicate and through layers of financial engineering to foreign, state-aligned capital flowing out of Tehran. The badge, one federal prosecutor said in a closed-door briefing, was not just tarnished, it was repurposed, and it must be rebuilt from the ground up. Now let me show you the scope that kept federal planners awake for weeks after the initial raids. When analysts mapped the full logistics architecture of Operation Broken Meridian, they discovered that the network was not a regional smuggling operation. It was a continental supply chain. Narcotics entered through the southern border, yes, but the distribution system exploited infrastructure that spanned the country. Trucking contractors operating under Department of Transportation permits hauled sealed containers from El Paso to distribution points in Memphis, Indianapolis, and Charlotte. Way stations along Interstate 20 and Interstate 40 experienced suspicious maintenance closures, sometimes lasting only 90 minutes, timed to the passage of specific convoys flagged in the seized logistics manifests. Agricultural inspection exemptions in the Rio Grande Valley were exploited to move shipments disguised as produce through checkpoints without secondary screening. The network could move an estimated 1.8 tons of narcotics per week across state lines without triggering a single automated alert. And the money moved in the other direction with equal precision. Revenue from street-level distribution flowed through the restaurant chains, the fake nonprofits, the ghost corporations, and ultimately into accounts in Dubai and Panama that fed back into the Iranian-linked financial architecture analysts had identified at Quantico. A closed loop, self-sustaining, growing. But the final file recovered from Governor Castellano's encrypted laptop was the one that reframed everything. Analysts called it the Meridian Doctrine, a 30-page strategic plan written in English and Spanish outlining a 10-year vision for converting the border corridor into what the document described as a permanent autonomous logistics zone. The plan called for the gradual placement of cartel-aligned officials into state and local government, the systematic defunding of federal cooperation programs, the legal restructuring of border enforcement to create jurisdictional gaps, and the establishment of legitimate business fronts sufficient to make the network economically indistinguishable from the regional economy. The document was not a fantasy. Investigators found that at least 11 of its 26 action items had already been implemented. The system had not merely been infiltrated, it had been redesigned, rebuilt from the inside to serve a future that belonged not to the citizens who lived there, but to the cartel empire that had quietly claimed it. So here is what remains when the flashbangs stop echoing and the helicopters land and the servers go dark. Power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in a campaign donation, in a rescheduled patrol, in a signature on a permit that no one reads, in the quiet ambition of a man who shakes hands at fundraisers while his other hand signs shipping orders for poison. The cost of that silence is not abstract. It is measured in the 112,000 Americans who died of drug overdoses in a single recent year. In the neighborhoods hollowed out by fentanyl, in the mothers who buried children who thought they were taking a painkiller and swallowed something manufactured in a desert tunnel to kill them. In the migrants locked in basements, sold as labor, moved like freight through a system that treated human beings as line items on a logistics spreadsheet. This story is fictional. The names are invented. The events are dramatized. But the architecture it describes, the intersection of foreign money, cartel logistics, political ambition, and institutional betrayal, those patterns are not fiction. They are warnings. If you are still here, if you watched this far, tap like so this story reaches more people. Comment the word expose if you believe these narratives need to be dragged into the light. Share it with someone who thinks the border is just a line on a map, because the line was never the problem. The problem was who learned to erase it from the inside. This has been a fictional dramatization. Stay aware, stay vigilant, and never assume that the people standing behind the podium are the ones standing on your side.